Hey guys, all right, so we are back again, episode two. So, last episode, we talked about important software to kind of get you started, such as Obsidian. And we also talked about Trello, which is a really good note taking software that we talked about. So, what we're going to talk about now is pipelines. So, pipelines are important. And I'm starting with like the essential things first because you really kind of have to know this stuff before you get deep into the Unreal Engine, and we will, trust me. But for these earlier episodes, I just want to make sure you guys are set up correctly so that you're not confused if I start talking about things in here and you don't know what's going on. Everything will just make more sense when you kind of understand the process of things. So right here, I made an example pipeline, and this is inside the software called Obsidian, which is free. And all you have to do is basically like, let's say you're going to make an asset, okay? And we're talking about when you do everything on your own for the most part, and you want to get everything going on your own so that you can kind of be your own factory when you have to make assets and stuff. Maybe you don't, but in this particular instance, we're going to talk about pipelines. So if you have an idea, so this is the idea phase, and this is where we get storyboarding, we get sketches, we get AI image examples, whatever it is, you got to kind of create like your own idea of what it is you want to make. Once we finally get that figured out, the next phase of the pipeline, and this is other stuff too. Like for example, storyboarding, I would probably use Obsidian. Sketching, if you have sketch software that you want to use, AI image generations to try to get like examples of images, something that you think you want to make for your game or whatever it is you want to do. So it depends on what you're using for this stuff. So there's a lot of different tools that can help you with the idea phase in general. The next phase is the geometry or the creation phase. So we're going to actually create the software through programs such as Blender, Maya, AI, or whatever it is that you're using. Now, once that is actually created, we then go into the next phase, which there's a sub here, which is an optional rigging or animation. If it's a character, is this a character? Is this a creature? Is this an animal? Is this something that needs to move? Is it a vehicle? Do we have to rig it so that it actually has like rigged components to it and stuff like that? And that's going to be done inside of Blender. So I'll get that opened up here in the background in a minute here. And well, that's what I use. I use Blender because it's free, and it's actually really good. But you can use Maya just the same. And then we get into the painting and the texturing. Now, for me personally, I don't use Blender for my materials or my texturing, but you can. You can do everything inside Blender if you want. I personally do not, but you can. I use actually when it comes to painting and texturing, I use Adobe Substance. And you can, at least you used to be able to, you can buy this on the Steam store. I already own it. I don't remember what it was. I think it might be like $150 now, but Adobe Substance Painter, if you want to do your own painting, then it's a really good thing to have. Personally speaking, I think that if you're like super strapped for cash, there's other methods that we can talk about that can help you with this, but it is one of the cheapest and best solutions to do everything on your own and like have just like an instant way to make things look really good. And we'll open up this software. I'll launch it here in a minute and we'll get that fired up too to kind of show you what that's all about. So once we get our painting and our texturing done, the next thing that we're going to finally do is we're going to move into the next phase, which is inside the Unreal Engine. So this will be UE, and this is going to be importing. Okay, so the importing phase. And then the next phase that we get into is inside UE. This is going to be our materials, collisions, and stuff like that. And then we get to the next final phase, which is going to be UE, if it lets me type. There we go. Um, Whatever it is. So functionality. I don't know. My spelling's terrible. So if I spell something wrong, don't laugh too hard. Okay, so yeah, so basically this is kind of the process of which we go. So we have idea phase, geometry. What are you using to create your actual object, your thing? Are we going to have to rig it or not? And then when we're done, we go back in here, and then if we have to do texturing and painting on our own, we would use something like Adobe Substance. If not, we could use this as a part of an AI system, or we want to do it inside of Blender or Maya, whatever you want to do. And then when we're done with that, we import it. There's a whole process to importing assets inside Unreal Engine correctly. And we got to make sure that we export it correctly if we're inside of Blender. So I will talk about that today so you guys can learn from this video and have the right settings so that you don't have to like go fish around forever for the right settings. And because we're going to do an example. And then Then we import it correctly, and then we bring in the materials. We set up the materials inside Unreal Engine. We set up the collisions, and that's important. That's important. People ignore this. This is very important to make sure that we're using the correct hierarchy for our materials. I will talk about material hierarchy. So we'll say we're going to use our master material integration. Um, and basically, what that's going to do is that's going to make sure that when we bring this in, we're not making a new material for the asset. We're actually using a material instance from our master material, which will help us with optimization. When we're done with that, then we make sure that it's actually functional. And that's going to be setting up whatever the asset is. If it's a rock or if it's a tree, it might be a rigged vehicle, whatever it may be, that's what we're going to do. So this is a pipeline. Okay. And again, no one really talks about this. I don't know why. I had to learn this the hard way, but you got to know this stuff. If you don't know this stuff, you're just kind of like dragging and dropping assets into your project, and it's going to just be a total disaster eventually. So you have to kind of learn not like everything, but you have to learn at least some type of pipeline. And this pipeline is just for an asset. So I would say a static mesh, a skeletal mesh, that's like an animated character, a rigged vehicle, or it could be just a cube, it could be a ball, it could be a rocket, a spaceship, whatever. And anything that you want to bring in that's a physical hard object is what this pipeline is basically for. There are other pipelines for other things, which we won't get into, such as if you're talking about groom, that's for hair. That's totally different. If you're talking about, I don't know, like other special rigged systems that might need to use other parts, then you got to take them through like a separate system if you're using a separate rigs plug-in inside a Blender. So there's like different side avenues that you can take. But generally speaking, we're going to keep this simple. And again, if you guys have questions, just hit me in the comments and I'll try to help you as much as I can. If I don't respond right away, don't be offended. I got a million things going on, but I try to read the comments as much as I can. Okay, so we're just going to go with a cube, right? So this is really basic, simple stuff. Now, whenever you make an asset inside Blender, um, or Maya, you want to make sure that you see this middle thing here, this middle point. So this is locked to the actual axis in the middle of the actual scene in Blender. That's called a pivot point. Okay, in Unreal Engine, that's called a pivot point. And what that means is when I move this block around, it's going to move anywhere I move it, but it's going to orbit around that middle point. You see how it's always staying true to the middle? So if we want to make this asset work correctly inside our engine, you got to make sure that this pivot point is in the right spot. Now, if I'm making, like, let's say a building that gets placed on the floor or something like that, then I want to make sure that I actually keep this pretty much on the ground. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes I'll sink in my assets just a little bit on the floor just in case. We can change this later in Unreal Engine. It's not the end of the world, but we want to make sure that our pivot point just for now is set to that ground. So I'm going to say set origin, and I'm going to say origin to 3D cursor because that's where we are in the on the ground right there. Okay. So now, as you can see, the pivot point for my cube, this little building that we're making, it is basically going to always be snapped to that as its center. So if I were to rotate this now again, you will see it's going to act really different. See how it tries to go around the whole thing like that? So it's going to orbit around that bottom instead of the middle. So this is the kind of thing you want for like a building. This is not the kind of thing you want for a rock. If you're going to do a rock, you would do in the middle usually, because you want the rock to like orbit in all different directions, right? So, okay, so we have our cube. The next thing you do for any object that you're doing is you just hit tab and we go into tab is what cycles us from object mode to edit mode. Okay, so I just hit tab. I'm in edit mode. That's fine. Choose faces if you want. That's fine too. And then all we do is we basically say we want UV, smart UV project. Okay, this is the fastest way to unwrap your UV. You always want to have an island margin. I like 0.003. I use that all the time. That seems to be good for me. And what this does is when you're think of it like a wrapping paper for a present, like a Christmas present. If you wrap, you have to wrap this thing right, and if we don't have it wrapped correctly, it gets crazy with math and it'll be too stretched and stuff. So what we're doing is when you add margins, you're saying to keep separation between the panels when we lay it all out on a piece of paper. So that way, like the wrapping paper won't like over bleed themselves and you'll get like weird edging problems. So usually I just do 0.003 and that gets the job done. I hit OK, good enough for me. Awesome. So now what we do is the export settings. We're going to say export. We're going to make this an FBX, although you can do a GTF, this or a GLB, GLD, GLTF. These are actually more optimized. Just fun little fact. These are more optimized for static meshes if you know they're not going to move. And FBXs are more optimized in the engine if you're doing things like skeletal meshes, animations, models, characters, enemies, stuff like that. So um, it's up to you. I'm just going to do an FBX for now because it's just an example. But and then I can show you the actual export settings right here in a second. So we're just going to say, let's bring this in here. Let's go here. And let's just say, actually, I'll put this under my normal 3D asset folder. Let's just do 3D and we'll say new folder, test, or we'll say tutorial. Okay, so we're going to put it in tutorials. And I'm now on the right side here. These are very important. Unreal Engine needs like a few things to be correct to not look goofy and give you weird errors when you're importing it. So the first thing we do is we want to only export what we have selected, because usually we're going to have just our asset in here that we're doing, not like you don't want like a garage of things in here unless you really know what you're doing. I mean, I've done both, but generally it's easier to just keep them isolated. So we're going to do selected only. We're going to choose mesh only. The only time we would do anything else here is if it's going to be a skeletal mesh, i.e., is it going to be clothing? Is it going to be a character? Is it going to be some type of dog? Is it going to be a rigged vehicle? Then we would do armature and mesh. And the only way that I selected both of these is just by holding shift. And you can select more than one. But 90% of the time, if the mesh is going to be static, meaning not moving, then we're just going to have a mesh. And when I say not moving, I mean you can still move it, but it's not moving like on its own, right? Like it's not physically morphing and changing. That means it's a static mesh. It's just still. You can kick the cube around with physics, but it's not going to physically like be bending and moving and stuff. And we can get into breaking them later. That's totally different. Okay, so we have a mesh. The next thing you want to go do is you go down here to geometry and you want to choose the smoothing. And instead of normals, Unreal Engine likes face. Okay, so just remember to change smoothing to face. And again, this is just for Blender. I know it might be a little different for Maya users, but whatever. Um, this is optional. Unreal Engine does have this backwards. They like, I think it's X forward or something. But to be fair, I usually just change this in the engine later anyways, and I've kind of like adapted my entire routine to just use Blender's standard. Um, it is what it is. So Z is usually up, but we're just making a quick little example here, and it's just a cube, so it really doesn't matter. But there are official settings that make this a little bit easier. Um, Really, you're not going to have to worry about this too much until you start getting into like, rigging with vehicles. It can be a pain because if the vehicle's rigged wrong, it'll go sideways instead of forward and stuff like that. But we're not going to overdo it today. We're just going to talk about basic assets. And then once this is in here, you don't need to do anything else. We usually never want to add leaf bones, just for the record. You almost never want that turned on. And we're good to go. So we're just going to say export. We're going to call this basic box. And we're going to say export in our folder. Make sure you organize your folders because it's going to get crazy. Boom, hit export. Okay. So two things we did. We made an object and we did our UV. Okay, you have to do that UV if you want it to be automatic. Sometimes you can do it inside another software program, but just to make life easier, you should probably do it inside Blender. All right, so now we're going to open up Substance, and this is optional, right? So like right now, we are right here. We're on optional. I'm sorry, right here. Yeah, so we're basically doing Adobe Substance. We're going to paint it inside of this. I will say that there's a lot of AI software out there that can do this for you. Whether you're doing the geometry phase or if you're doing the painting phase, there's a lot of different AI programs, or you can get different plugins from different people, different asset packs, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Okay, so let's keep going here. So now we're going to go inside Substance and I'm going to import this. Let's do new. I always do 4K on the imports, and then I export as 2K. And then that gives you a little bit more resolution crushed, which is important. So we're going to choose our asset. and I'll run through this real fast. We're going to go to tutorials. There it is. Basic box. Bring it in. Hit OK. Now, this is pretty cool. So, in Substance, what you can do here, as they get a free commercial, and no, I'm not sponsored. What you can do here is you'll bake this. So we come up here to the top and look, whoops, I went through that really fast. Sorry, it's like second, it's just like muscle memory for me. So I got to slow my roll here a little bit. So right up here at the top, there's a little, looks like a dessert croissant or something. But anyways, you click on that and then this will open up your baking, optional section and you can do like cages. So you can do like high to low poly and all sorts of stuff. But we're just gonna keep it simple. I just bake in 4K if you really want to. There you go. Let's just bake this. So now it's gonna take all of the height data for us. It's gonna do all that hard work that you would probably normally have to do inside of Blender. So it's gonna make our lives a hell of a lot easier. That's why I like using this for certain assets if I really need it. Now we go back to painting mode and we can drag and drop anything we want on here. So let's pick a material that works well. Let's try something that's got a little latitude. How about like this? And there we go. Okay, so now you can see that we've got our texture on here. It looks really good. It's a nice cube. And if we really wanted to, we could start painting on this as well. So we can do logo stuff. So if you guys like making Luma mats, this is where Photoshop would come in. You would go into Photoshop and you can make like a Luma mat. So let's just do something really quick. I'll just bring one of my masks in that I made from a while ago. And we're just going to scale that up. Okay, so then we have like some kind of like painted symbol on here, which looks pretty cool. And then we can change the paint. If you click on the paintball here, we can actually change this around and we can do all sorts of stuff to this. So we can say, we can sink it in. So now it starts to look like it's actually inside, like it's engraved inside the actual cube itself. And this is illusionary. This is actually an illusion, and this is how you make cheap geometry. Like rather than make this in geometry, where it's got all these cuts and angles and it gets expensive, we can just do it on the actual material by doing it this way. And that's how a lot of games do it. That's how they fake you out, and they save a ton of optimization on that. So we can make this more materials or metallic, I should say. We can make this different color. Let's go with like a green like that. There we go. And there you go. So now you got yourself some kind of symbol on there. It looks pretty cool. And we can also add text. So if you're really into this stuff, and this is all part of Pipeline, guys. This is why Pipeline is so important. Once you start to have this system figured out, like where things go, what software you're going to use for what, blah, blah, blah. I really just want to show everyone like a proper tutorial for pipelines here. Um, I can say like energy block. I can scale this down. Then I can go back in here and I can scale this up. There we go. And now we've got um, some type of random asset called an energy block. Pretty cool. All right. So I'm going to say File, Export Textures. We're going to find our folder. One problem with this software is it just always throws me in the most random folders. So I always have to like dig through everything every freaking time. 3D. And we're going to go to tutorials. There it is. Okay, I'm going to make a folder called block paint. Sorry, I'm going to call that paint underscore block. I usually do this where I'll call it like a paint folder for the same asset name. So like if it's called like the expedition, then I would have the expedition model for like a vehicle, and then I would have like paint expedition. So that way, like that's the paint folder for all the files. And then what I do is you want to choose output template Unreal Engine 4 pack. I use 5.6. It just says Unreal Engine 4. It's just like the standard. It's not what you think it is. It's just like basically a coding system to say this is the process that Unreal likes to use for its textures. So you want to make sure you choose Unreal Engine 4 pack, and then we can change the texture to 2K. So this is where we go back to 2K resolution. I actually recommend against 4K. Um, if it's a small project or if you're doing ArcViz, it's okay. But otherwise, even if it's in a game, just use 2K. You're going to save yourself a lot of drama. If you really want to, you can still do 4K and you can crush later in Unreal Engine. which is still fairly a good idea, like, especially if you're dealing with, like, armor or, like, characters that need to have a lot of high detail. But if it's just something generic like this or a plant or something basic, I almost always just use 2K because there's really no point. Nobody cares if it's that much more detailed, and nor will you even be able to tell really. Texts, fonts, panels, really complicated things, you probably wanna go with 4K, but for the most part, 2K is usually fine. Okay, so we're just gonna do this, and I'm gonna hit export, and then it does this. And what this does is this will export my base color, my emissives, my normals, my occlusions all into one texture file. Okay, so that's done. Now that whole process can be skipped if you're using special software, AI, or something else. But if you want true customization, you can just use the software system such as that. So, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to close this down. You guys got a good example from that. Now we're going to go into my actual game, and I'm just going to show you an asset real quick. We're going to bring that in. Okay, so let's go to assets folder, and we're going to put this under deco. And I'm just going to make a folder real quick called example. I'm going to open up my folder. So now I have my file and I have my paint folder. So I just drag the stuff into the actual folder. So here comes my FBX file. It's going to say, how do I want to import this? For the most part, all the standard stuff is fine. Make sure you don't have any weird rotations, translations. Make sure the scale is 1 to 1. I do change these depending on what assets I'm bringing in, such as enemies. Sometimes they have to be flipped. Remember how we didn't really care how Blender exported? Well, this is where you would fix it. So if it comes in wrong, just delete everything and re-import it and flip it. Um, and then you can change your scale here as well, even a skeletal mesh, which is like a character. So if you want them to be really big, this is when you choose it right here. Makes life a lot easier. We don't need animations. We don't care about this stuff. Down here, it's got materials and stuff. So if we said, do we want to import materials? Well, in this particular instance, we don't because we didn't include materials inside the mesh, which is what you would do in Blender or AI or something else. But since we're doing it in Substance, we don't want to import any materials, so we're fine. We do not want to create materials. We can turn that off. So we just import the actual asset, and there it is. So this is our basic cube, which to be fair, we could have gotten from inside here. They have basic cubes already and stuff under their shapes category, but we're just making an example. So we have our cube. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the folder where we just exported all the paints. So these are our paint files. These are basically what you want. So we have a texture file, we have a normal height map file, and then we have an RGB file. This is very standard. You want your game to accept these three things just like this. Let's just grab that paint folder. I'm going to drag it in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab our master material. Okay. And I'll show you how to do this in a minute, but we're going to grab our master material. So I'm going to go to where my materials are. That's way down here. And you see my master material, which is right here, MMM. And I'm going to right click it and say create material instance. And this is what you guys will do. You want to make sure that you have a master material. It can be anything for now. It doesn't matter. Just make a master material and then have a material instance come off of that. So we're going to call this MI for master or for material instance, MI underscore uh, test cube, whatever. Okay. We're going to move this into that folder, which is right up here. We'll put it in our paint folder. And then we're going to open this up. And this is why pipelines are so powerful. My master material already knows that I'm going to need 3 of these files, texture, RGB, and our normal. So now all I have to do is just drag and drop each one of these into their designated sections. So here's the texture, here's the flat normal map, the height map data, and here's the RGB. Now sometimes RGB does not come in correctly. If you get an error like this, using substances happens a lot. So what you sometimes have to do is come in here and just check it and see what's going on. So the RGB came in as a normal map, which is not correct. See this compression, it says normal. This should be set to default. This should be set to, well, that's fine. This is just a texture group. But yeah, that should have been set to default. and then it's going to squirm about a bunch of other things, but generally speaking, you're fine. Okay, so we're going to take our cube now. Let's open that up, and we're going to put that new material that we just made onto here. And there you go. And now we have our own custom asset that we just made from Substance, from Blender to Substance to Unreal Engine. And if we want to bring that cube into the game now, we are right here on our chart. So we did this, and now we just did this. So now we're going to do this section here, which is setting up our actual materials and collisions. So let me just do the collisions. So this cube should be using basics. So the first thing we do is down here in the lower right, we make sure that it's using the right physics or the right collisions. So we hit apply. This will automatically use AI to try to detect the best green. As you can see, the green lines that represents the collision. And we also do not want to use complex collisions if we can help it. Complex collisions are very expensive. I highly recommend you do not have complex collisions moving either. So we're going to type in complex, and we're going to set, instead of project default, we're going to change it to simple collision as complex. Okay. And what this does, get in the habit of doing this for most assets if you know that they're going to be getting tossed around or you're going to have to connect with them or hit them. Generally speaking, this works fine. If you're going to be doing like a huge object that has lots of pointy things on it and you want characters to be able to walk on each crevice, then you're probably going to have to use complex collisions. But for the most part, try to use simple as much as you can. It'll save you and it will optimize your game a lot. So there is our little block. It's been fully optimized. Now, there's some other cool things in here that people don't even realize exist. So let me just talk about them real quick. You can actually scale this down if we wanted to optimize it further. Obviously, nanite support is great, unless your game is not going to support graphics cards below, like, I forget what it is, like 3060s or something. So you might not want nanites. You can also go to our viewing display here, and we can change and look at optimization modes and change this to shader complexity and quads. Okay, so again, that's under lit right here, and I'm on 5.6, so if you don't see it on this side, it might be over here on this side. But anyways, we just do lit and we go to optimization modes. You always want to check this with a lot of your assets and go to shaders and complexity quads. And what this does is this shows us on a little scale down here. Let me just make sure that my camera is hidden so you can see this a little bit better. So you can see like this is good right here. This is bad technically, and then this is extremely bad. Generally speaking, you are fine as long as you're in the red to the green. You want it to be green, but red isn't terrible. Um, and so if we want to make this better though, I'm going to show you some cool things you can do. Um, if we look at our actual information over here on the upper left, it's really simple. 12 nanite triangles, 24 nanite vertices. I can't talk. And then we've got like 24 fallbacks. So this is really clean, actually. This is really not that big of a deal. I think what's happening is the material is actually a little bit more expensive than it should be. So there's things that we could do to try to change that and make this a little bit better. You could come in here if you really wanted to. You could use Oodle and you could start enabling compressions. You could also go to your asset here and we can change the percentage if it's like high geometry. You can change fallback target to, I think it's percentage triangles, and then we can turn this down because sometimes auto isn't the best option. Another thing to think about is sometimes nanites will mess up your object's geometry, so you might have to fool around with manually tweaking these settings as instead of just turning on a button. So these are some interesting pointers to kind of remember. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to, and you don't have to do all this stuff for every asset. I'm just showing you guys stuff that most people don't even talk about. Um, we can change a few other things down here. If we go to our, if you're using LODs, you would choose which kind of LOD group it goes into. This is important for memory optimization because then it dedicates certain memory to certain sections. Um, just as much as the textures are important if you put these in the right texture group. These can make a difference. It's there's a lot of different areas you could talk about this forever, but I don't want to get too into optimization right now because that's a whole episode on its own. So let's take a look at our collisions now. Block all is fine for this. But if we wanted to, we could do a custom collision and we could choose like make this a harvestable resource. These are customs that I've made myself. These are not standard. And then you can change a whole bunch of other things as well. So for this particular instance, world static, it's fine. So simple collision physics material. So what does that actually mean? Simple collision physics material means a physics, not a visual material. Um, it's a physics-based material. So do you want it to be slippery? Do you want it to be wet? Do you want it to be crunchy like sand? Do you want it to be rough? Do you want it to be grippy like rubber? Okay, so this is a physics material that we can assign to this cube. And what's cool about this is if I add something such as like rubber, then if we're doing simulated physics, this will actually stick. So it'll stick to the ground more. It won't roll around. It won't slide. It'll stick and act like rubber. And this is because we made a physics material that is designed to have high friction rates and all sorts of stuff. So that's another thing you can do. And this is just a regular physics material that you can make. There's nothing too crazy about it, honestly. You just create one, and then you set up some random settings, and then most of it's standard. You just mess with the friction, to be honest with you, and then you just apply it to something. You will want this for grass. You'll want this for sand. You'll want this for a bunch of things in your game. But right now, we're just doing a quick little example, and we're good to go. Okay, so we did that. Now let's bring the actual item in, and there's our item. So this is our item now in the actual game. We brought it in. It looks good, looks clean. And as you can see, that looks like a AAA quality item. It looks nice and clean. I can play the game. We can run around and we can check this out and we can see like, okay, there's our cube. Looks good. Um, not too bad, right? And we can make it simulate physics if we really wanted to. We could do whatever we wanted with it. But long story short, it's a cube. We made our asset and we went from start to finish and now it's active in the game. If we really wanted to, we could put it inside an actor and make it an interactable and turn it into like a storage chest, or you could do all sorts of stuff to it. So that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully, this pipeline video actually shows you guys more um, ideas and concepts of like ways you want to try to properly navigate for your game. And you kind of have to think about these things before you start, just so you don't dive in and get lost and get overwhelmed with everything all over the place. Because if you don't have a proper pipeline, you're going to have to figure one out eventually. Again, there's a lot of different tools out there between AI, software that you can get from other companies, or just third party plugins you might be bringing in. So just really think hard about that pipeline and how you want to handle it. And, let me know in the comments if you have any problems, but that's generally how you do it. That's just a basic pipeline. All right, guys, good luck on your games. I'll catch you guys on the next one.